It's not just that women were borrowing from the native traditions. They were. But Seneca created their own rituals, and powerful rituals that continue to this day. A lot, well, circles forever. I mean, those beautiful paintings on the barn, you know, that all came from just blossoming of spirit. And fire circles, affirmations, focusing energy. Yeah, we cut the fences and went in and painted, but we also circled before we went in. We envisioned what it was that we wanted to accomplish. And this is not something that we thought maybe would work. We knew this to work. You know, feathers, rocks, shells, drumming, it was all happening there. And I mean, really the outreach from this little place in upstate New York was tremendous, tremendous. Seneca was a training ground, and we did it all on our own in terms of women. We did it with women.
We are the weavers, we are the web, we are the flow, and we are the ebb. We are the weavers, we are the web, we are the flow, and we are the ebb. We are the weavers, we are the web, we are the flow, and we are the ebb.
Connections to Philadelphia and New York and California and Minnesota, I mean, those connections with other women, the women who sent checks to buy the farm, and that kind of gives you a security that is very different if you're alone or a small group doing something that's that locally outrageous or disliked or whatever. I mean, we were so well connected that there was I think there was a risk to anyone who, including the military, the local police, you know, that if they touched us the wrong way, there would have been a lot of repercussions.
Down at Greenham on a spree, financed by the KGB, dirty women squatters in the mud, la 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 la, mostly vegetarian, when we're not devouring men, foreigners and other forms of scum. Mr. Andropov supplies us with our vodka, Mr. Castro makes sure we're kept in dope, I wish he would. Most of us are outside agitators, who can't see that Mr. Reagan brings us hope, brings us hope. What a bunch of layabouts, don't know what it's all about. How we need deterrence for the best, la 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 la, lighting fires and burning toes, bringing communism close, threatening the safety of the West.
I mean, the thing about the Peace Camp for me was like, I mean, I remember when I met Woody, I was like, I had never in my life really run into anyone who was I felt like was like me, you know? I never ran into women who would rather like go out and figure out how to make the water system go all the way back to the back of a 50-acre piece of land, you know? It's like, I never knew women like that. In my whole life, I never knew women like that. I was like 20-something years old, and I remember meeting Woody, and she said she was a carpenter, and I almost lost my mind. I almost just like went into another dimension. It was so amazing.
In so many things that we all try to do, it is so hard to kind of cross that divide and involve more and more people of color in things, or have it be such that they feel welcome, or whatever it is. Neither of those terms are right for describing it. We weren't. The groups that were pulling it all together were white women. That's who we were. And I think although our handbook, you know, had its credo of accepting everyone, and it just wasn't. I'm not sure how we could have done things differently. I don't have any answers to what we could have done differently.
You who create the war machine, you've got blood on your hands. Your violent exploitation is obscene. You've got blood on your hands. You're raping my body, raping my body, and you're raping the land, and you're raping the land, 'cause you're a warmonger. You got blood on your hands.
We wanted to disrupt that whole process and make them know that they weren't all powerful, that they were vulnerable. I mean, not only were they cutting our water lines, but one night, sitting in the office, hearing a thump next to my head on the wall, and going out and finding a hunting arrow.
They call him Ron with a neutron bomb, brave and courageous with a big problem. He'll solve it all with a neutron bomb. Oh, my heart just filled. Everybody else is will. If we let him drop that bomb, the neutron bomb, the neutron bomb.
I got hooked up with this women's center in downtown Geneva, and it was me and Kim Blacklock and a bunch of other women, and a bunch of women came into our little women's center and said, we want to make this peace camp thing down the lake. And Kim and I were like, oh my god, this is so amazing, I can't believe this is happening here, oh my god. And all the other women were like, this is really messed up, this is going to really mess up our women's center, you know.
After the meeting ended on Sunday, the announcement was that they were really close to actually taking possession of the land. There were a couple of paid positions for the whole encampment, not very many, and they did not pay very much. An office coordinator position, and they needed somebody to do logistics, and that's right up my alley. That's what I do, is I supervise things being made. So I went and I got interviewed for this job. Within a day or two, I think. It might have even been the next day. I remember getting a phone call or calling the people that had interviewed me for the logistics job, and I hadn't gotten it. I could not believe what a mistake they had made. Don't they know that I am the perfect person for this job? I mean, I was positive it was because I was a punky butch dyke, and I really looked very different than most of the organizing committee. A lot of them were church-based people, a lot of dykes, anti-nuclear activists and stuff like that. But I mean, I felt like I was just so different than everybody else that was there. They gave the job to somebody else. I could not believe it. I said, they don't know what they're doing. This just makes it clear to me they don't know what they're doing. I'm going to go up there and do the job anyway. I don't care who you hired. I'm going to go do it.
Well, I'm going to make it reality. And I'm going to take it. Just you wait and see. Well, I'm tired of waiting on tomorrow. Buried in the heartache and the sorrow. I'm gonna grab all my dreams and make them real.
I was stationed over at Seneca Army Depot, and we were in orientation because when I first arrived at the post, they gave us a talk about where we were allowed to be and where we weren't allowed to be, and that was standard protocol at any duty station you were at. And they mentioned the Peace Encampment. I was with a group of men, and the first sergeant come down, and I don't want to catch no soldiers. And he points at me, he goes, especially you that are over there at the camp. And he goes, and when we have protesters out here, we'll need extra troops to support. And he goes, I'll never ask you. And I thought, I wonder why me? So it made me curious about what was this. And that's the first thing I did when I got off post, is I went over there to see what was going on.
I'm leaping out into the darkness. I take my life in my own hands. I'm leaping out into the darkness. I hope my sisters understand.
I went to this newly purchased land, and the grass was like up to your knees. I mean, it was just really thick, and an old falling down house and falling down outhouse and falling down barn and falling down garage. There I was wandering around the land for the first few days all by myself, the grass up to my knees, and I'm like, well, people are going to be showing up, so we at least have to have a sign on the, I was determining what we needed to have immediately. I mean, from absolute nothing, so I found a little can of spray paint, and a little board somewhere and made a little sign that says this was the Peace Camp and put it out at the mailbox there. And I think the women in New York City had come up with this, the symbolism of the women's sign, the peace sign, and then the little tent sign. Because certainly I could not have come up with that all by myself.
We're gonna rise with the fires of freedom. Truth is the fire that'll break our chains. We're gonna stop the fires of destruction. Healing is the fire running through our veins.
Peace Camp changed my life.
What year is it?
84. And it was in June, I think. And they had to get everything up and running by July 4th again, because that's when they were expecting this big deluge of women coming. And they had like 3 weeks, and they were trying to build shitters in the back for women in the camping area, which they hadn't even started. And they weren't trying to build shitters in the front, which they had started by digging a hole, but they weren't very far at that yet. And they said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I was traveling in Mexico, but now I'm on my way up to upstate in the Adirondacks, and I'm an apprentice carpenter. This woman says, she says she's a carpenter. And they're like, we were just looking for a carpenter. As a matter of fact, we just did a ritual in our meeting for a carpenter because we needed a carpenter sent to us. And we came out and out of dinner, and here you are, you're a carpenter. You know, you were sent to us.
The water's gonna rise up from deep in the sea. The wind's gonna rise up from deep in the trees. The moon's gonna shine on the earth's disease. And the women are gonna rise up. The women are gonna rise up and generate our own energy.
I know I felt really unhappy, probably angry at times that the transition was taking place to some vision that we didn't have for it when we raised the money and set the place up, and that we were much more comfortable with turning it over to local Native Americans or local people in general. And there was a real discomfort that I had about what was it going to become and how would that change its image in history. You know, how would that really change it?
I take delight in the peace of the river that flows so gently to the strength of the sea. And I take delight in the love that is flowing just like a river.
And we drove up to the camp, and I was expecting thousands of women and, you know, a well-run office that was getting the mail and organizing donations, and we get there, and it's like this decaying farm, and there is no one there. There's completely no one there. So we like park the car. 10 minutes later, somebody drives by, takes a picture of our car. We're like, this must be the right place. So we went to the house, which was unlocked. So we went in and we found the folder on the wood stove that said Peace Camp Orientation. So then we like went out and walked all around the land and looked at all the pictures painted on the barns, and ran another errand somewhere and came back, and there was this young woman from New Zealand there. And by that weekend there were, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 women showed up for the weekend. But so we were there, and we were the Peace Camp, which was really weird, but also really, when it was really functioning, that worked really well, because in fact any women could show up and answer the phone and send mailings out. Like anyone could show up and actually make it work.
When I was a little girl, my mother told me it's a man's world. You gotta try hard for an education, 'cause it'll improve your situation. But Mom was wrong, and now I see I've got to fight to set me free. To smash the system, smash the state. Why do we all sit and wait for someone else to do it when we could be free by now?
Then the women that still got in there and painted the water tower? Or was it mission first, people always, and everything?
Two astrologers planned that. Jane and Roberta planned the timing
Of it.
for Sita and
Andrea.
yeah, they told them when to go. Like with like 7:30 at night. It was not. It was just a little more hazy, not quite really dark yet, and it was starting to sprinkle. And it was actually exactly what they planned. They got dressed up in fatigues, army, and had cap, army, and a duffel bag full of paint and extension. And I think at one point, one had to climb up
on the other one's
shoulders. And Sita is 6'1" or 2".
Wow.
Anyway, they went in, did the whole thing, put it back in their duffel bag, and walked right out.
There we are at the town hall meeting, and it was packed. I mean, there must have been 200-300 people there. For that area, that meant every household came, They wanted to know who we were and how come it was just going to be women. And we were talking about, well, as women, we traditionally have been put in roles. I felt like I should have, white lace dress on with big hair. And there was this one guy. He was just adamant about women can't do it, just can't do it. And what if something happens and there's no man there to protect you? What are you gonna do? And I wish I had a camera on this, because Samoa slowly rises up from her chair. I mean, slowly. And she just kept going. And you could see everybody in the room just going. She just said, I don't think it's going to be a problem. And everybody just burst out laughing, man.
We're shameless hussies, but we don't give a damn. We're loud and rockers, and we're fighting for our rights and our sex and our need to be free. Men call us names that are nasty and rude, like lesbian, men-hater, winter prostitute. What a laugh, 'cause a half of it's true.
That whole flag episode was the most trying episode I think that we had, and we had a lot of them, fire being thrown on the lawn, and that was the most divisive, and it made it very hard to figure out who you could trust, because you felt that certainly there had to be people within the group who were planted there to create division and to refocus us on internal conflict rather than on what we were set out to do. And some of those people, it was very obvious who they were. You could see them as career agitators, right, who were employed by the government.
You've got to stand up and speak your mind. You've got to do it all by yourself. And once you made the move, you'll feel much better, 'cause there are millions who come before you. They're out there waiting to take your hand, to join their strength with yours to make this a better world.
We learned about zapping that summer. We found out about the different kinds of microwave radiation, and that this was in fact simply another kind of weapon that used the electricity of our own bodies. And we certainly heard the stories about women having the violent dreams, women having suicidal dreams. We would get hit with tremendous headaches that would cease as soon as you walked off the land. And there was a lot of documentation. I mean, the women from Greenman came through and talked about they had done all of the record keeping there for years. This clearly wasn't just one person saying, I'm having a bad day. And I experienced it. I mean, I experienced the walking off the land and having it stop, and watching my dog react to things that we did not know were happening.
You raid the earth, you raid my body. I can feel her trembling in my soul. route, you clog my life stream. With your poison weapons of control. You say you only follow orders. It's just your job, a day's routine. To kill and justify the murders. As you guard and drive your death machines. Your strength is an illusion. Your lies are an intrusion on my life, my sacred space. And the words we've written on your doors to destruction might be wiped clean, but their truth can't be erased.
There was a lot of curiosity about who we are. There was a lot of confusion about what we were planning to do. I think we were constantly trying to explain ourselves and define what we were about, and oftentimes just providing information, results in people calming down and saying, oh, is that all? Is that what it is? And so I think if there was a recurrent theme, it was explaining what we were about, stressing that we were nonviolent. And then the question that always came was, who's behind you? Are you being supported by Russia? Are you communists? Who is behind you? There were a lot of fears about what was going to happen, and I think I knew that there was going to be a lot of change as a result of what we did, just by virtue of exposure to local people, from people who are very diverse from all over the place with very diverse thought.
Circle for survival, circle for the right, not to disappear into the everlasting night. Circle all the places, circle day and night, enclose them in a wall of sacred strength and sight. Let the people see them for what they really are. Let the people know they threaten our home star.
Transform or Die happened because we, being the women who were still actively involved, we realized we needed to have a big gathering to make a decision about what are we going to do. Are we going to sell the land? Are we going to give it to the Cayuga? Are we going to make a nature reserve? Are we going to keep living here as a peace presence? Like, there were all these conflicting opinions, and the land needed a lot of work and upkeep that had not been happening. The weeks of Transform or Die were really intense, because those conversations were like, what are you people still doing here? We did the real political work. Now there's just these freeloaders who expect women to support them. And I also came up that summer against some women who came there who were there because they had nowhere else to be in the world and no resources. And really that summer learned about that conflict between, we came here for one summer to do a political protest, kind of as opposed to, this is an ongoing cultural revolution where we're going to try to invent a new way of living. And that conflict was really intense over Transform or Die.
Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. Listen, listen, listen to my heart song. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you. I will never forget you. I will never forsake you.
I was a good soldier. I mean, they'd say, this is what you say, I can neither confirm nor deny. Of course, everybody knows they have weapons there. I mean, you could tell by the patrolling. And what was I? I was in the ordnance. Why would they have ordnance personnel there if there wasn't weapons there? I worked out in the farmhouse, and that's what we called it, packing and unpacking weapons. So I knew. I respected the military by saying, don't tell what we have out here. And I never told anybody at the camp. I said, yeah, I imagine they do have weapons over there. I never specified what kind or what not kind, because I was in a dual world. I had to live over here. There was an old Air Force base previous to that. And it has a long history, and it's a hurt history. you just look at it and go, it's one disaster into the next disaster into the next disaster. And it finally died. I remember reading in the newspaper, Seneca Army Depot closing. And it made me cry. And it wasn't because any other reason than I thought, it finally can rest. That ground can finally rest.
We ain't gonna make no war no more. Goddess says no war no more. Everybody says no war no more. I sure say no more of this war. Ain't gonna make no war no more. We say love not war no more. That's why we're camping here.
That's part of what it meant to be there, was to really choose to live in a knowledgeable way. Like the entire world, especially the entire U.S. population, was living as if Hiroshima had barely happened, and as if these horrible, horrible weapons meant nothing, and we could all just go on with our happy little lives. And to choose to, and this is one of the things that drew me there, because I need to live in truth, was to choose to live at the peace camp and to engage at the peace camp, was to choose to live being acutely aware. You know, it was 2 minutes till midnight all the time, and it was getting closer, and it was, you know, we sang songs about that, about, you know, the countdown to the midnight on the atomic clock. Even if we were just, you know, playing and growing vegetables and, you know, doing daily life at the camp, it still meant you were right next to it, and you had to be awake to what was happening.
Resolution has to happen to some extent fairly quickly. You learn at an enormously speeded up rate almost. And the encampment was that way. And so I'm seeing that there's a way that like revolution happens.
When you talk of revolution, I wonder what you see. Did you read it in their history books or watch it on TV? The only revolution this world has ever seen is the little man against the big man, and they're all meant to be. Talk of revolution, I have a lot to say of day-to-day rebellion in women-loving ways. Whether we're holding hammers or cutting army wire, I know the wheels are turning like circles round the fire. Whether we're holding hammers or cutting army wire, I know the wheels are turning like circles round the fire.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think that it gave such strength to so many people who were involved in the disarmament movement and the feminist movement at the time on an individual basis. And I think those people took that back to their work and their homes, and I think it changed people's lives dramatically. You know, in the big picture of social change, you know, did it affect the government? Well, it certainly did on a local level. You know, it affected both politics locally in terms of town council and, you know, everything that was going on there, but it affected the people at the base in terms of how penetrable the place was, I mean, we got to the Q zone and hung out there. You know, we got into the water tower and painted it in the middle of the night. I mean, it made a farce out of their idea of security, and that was something that I think resounded way beyond Seneca County, New York. I think that went right back to Washington. It was an embarrassment. How could these women do this? And what I loved about it was how playfully we did it, and how it was nonviolent, and it was creative with yarn and paint and whatever else we used, our spider webs and